Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Cami is off today. Long lines continue on day 3 of early voting here in Wisconsin. The political analyst telling Action 2 News this early turnout points to new trends that were not seen 4 years ago. We begin today with the first alert update. Drew Best joining now in studio with more. Drew.
Bill, political expert and history professor at Lawrence University, Gerald Poder, says nearly 500,000 Wisconsinites have already cast their votes, either in person or by mailing back an absentee ballot. That number continues to grow as more voters take on the long lines at municipal clerks' offices throughout the state. High turnout and a slowdown in the state system that prints absentee ballot labels is contributing to the wait times. Appleton being one of the several cities still seeing up to an hour-long wait. Poder tells us the high absentee turnout stems from Republicans making a stronger push to early voting after Donald Trump told voters to wait until Election Day in 2020. On the other hand, Poder says Democratic counties are seeing a slight drop in early voter turnout compared to the last election. Poder also believes many voters have already made up their minds on this presidential election.
I have very rarely seen in any presidential election the amount of polarization and visceral dislike and anger directed at a particular candidate.
The Wisconsin Elections Commission providing an update on label printing delays this afternoon. It reads in part, quote, "The delays have only affected label printing times. Every other function of the system that clerks use to print is working optimally. At this time, there is no reason to believe this is affecting other areas of election administration or state government, nor is there any reason to believe the printing delays were caused by a cyber attack," end quote. The Wisconsin Elections Commission says the new label printing process that has added time to the early voting process is not required to cast an absentee vote, but it adds to the efficiency for local election officials. Hear more from voters on their voting experience tonight at 5. Bill?